This is hilarious. Last week I was asked by Jenna to join the gang to do my little rant about hearing from God, prayer, etc. But on Sunday morning I got whacked, slam dunked, and had to call in a sickie early yesterday morning. And so, like a petulant child, this morning I sulked around wondering what had happened, what sort of Christian was I that I couldn't pray myself out of those doldrums. Went to start editing the book, Untucked Christian, this morning. And as I was editing it, lo and behold, there I was editing the section about hearing from God. So, here we go, see what you think. How can you expect me to do my will in your life if you don't do my will in the life of others? Said God. Yeah, right, you say. The only time I heard an audible voice of this God of the Bible, this so-called alive spiritual being, speaking to me, once described by bosses and cops as a very good investigator, body for me, who knew all about the word fraud, I turned into the short cul-de-sac within Whangarei's most lower socio-economic area, i.e. the closest NZ gets to a slum, or a ghetto, which it isn't. But Otanerau has more than its share of social problems, crime and violence. Most cities have a suburb like it, where culture and community flourish, yet the negative side of society rules. I was inbound to investigate, assess and report on a consumer credit claim. Someone buys something on hire purchase, includes insurance, later it's stolen or destroyed by accident, theft or whatever, enter the assessor. McLaren's had the contract for assessing all such claims in the city for a major finance company, and almost all the claims involved one supplier retailer, and almost all losses, mostly burglaries and theft, took place in this suburb. After a heap of them seemed to endlessly roll in, I got suspicious and told the boss. He ignored it. Just get on with it, he ordered. So I did. That was the mindset as I drove slowly along the street looking for an address. A more boring part of being an assessor there never was. The significance of hearing God's voice smashed my cosy, logical brain. I was going nuts. Okay. I was going here. I want you to pray. The significance of hearing God's voice. I was going hearing voices. Was I hearing voices? I want you to pray for people on the job. I knew beyond a shadow of doubt were what his words amounted to, and that was a professional no-no. You have got to be joking, I reacted. It's not that I was against it. Hey, I was born again, happy clappy, believer, before Paula died. That was my first wife. But my life, including spiritual journey, had radically changed. I was still a believer, but any zealous intentions remaining after Paula's death were almost dead in the water. I went to church, loved Jesus Christ, had a strong faith, occasionally prayed for people, if it was safe, e.g. in a church environment, but that was it. Also, I saw the odd little sign, wonder and miracle follow after prayer, and I even prayed for an occasional person on the job. But that was when I was self-employed, my own boss. I could do what I liked, sort of, and my wife was alive. Paula was gone several years. I wanted a normal life. Here's the thing. To understand this aversion to hearing from God thing, I could pray without anyone, including God, telling me to. I prayed for an arson suspect once. I know, shock horror. It was my last job before stopping work. Too busy caring for Paula and 3 boys full time. The file involved a suspicious fire in the far north. Said suspect was a giant German. He owned a large motel in the glistening part of Northland's east coast. That business smouldered in a pile of black wreckage before police charged him with arson. I was making my last trip north for that job when, halfway, pangs of guilt crept. My wife was at home seriously ill, and I was charging around the countryside seriously not ill. Along the straights of State Highway 1 north of Marua, I swung onto the verge and slammed my car to a halt. About to haul a U-turn back home, finish off by phone whatever it was I had to do, leave it to cops or delegate it to the insurance head office investigator from Auckland, already on the job, teaming up with me and a consulting fire engineer to prove arson and who did it. Suddenly, no audible voice of God, just a powerful sense to keep going north and pray for the German. Wrestling with crazy thoughts of praying for someone big enough to throw me into the nearby Pacific Ocean with one hand, I pondered. Engine idling, rural New Zealand all around, State Highway 1 traffic noisily passing into their own worlds of whatever. I didn't need this. Besides, unbeknown to him, said large German was soon to be charged with arson fraud. But by now, as a 2-year-old born-again, baptized in the Holy Spirit Christian, I knew the signs, the prompts from my God, flags waving, and I was learning to trust him. So I continued driving for 2.5 hours, to the remote coastal location, and after another interview of the German, said to him, "Hey, I hope you don't mind. This may seem weird, but I just want to pray for you before I go," and ripped into a simple blessing, a conversation prayer, one-sided, a thanks prayer. He gawked at me, astonished, Pacific Ocean gleaming in his eyes. That he didn't toss me into the nearby bay, glistening like diamonds on another perfect blue sky day, was as miraculous as what followed. He looked hard at me. Then, in a heavy German accent, "Thank you. That's interesting, because," and he gave a name, "did exactly the same for me yesterday." Whoa. A friend living nearby, whose identity to this day I've no idea about who he was also going about God's work. Now, this insurance company assessor was doing the same. His world was getting seriously messed up. That was years before, and the context is, I didn't need weird audible voices to tell me what to do. Now I was driving not to a tourist resource area, but Whangare's most challenging suburb. But the same pattern of coincidences was about to emerge again and again and again after returning to assessing profession from being a solo home dad and teacher aide at the boys' school. It was November 1995. Instead of powering up to a far north beach where a giant German awaited, big enough to swat me and my faith into the ocean, I was travelling at low speed into Whangare's lowest socio-economic area. Otangare is a hard place, full of hard people, letterboxes with hard numbers hard to find, squinting. Which house was it? I was not expecting nor desiring to hear his voice. The address appeared. I parked on the street, got out of the car and walked up to the front door. Knocked. A woman answered, and I explained who I was. Suddenly, a noise behind me erupted. A vehicle noisily swung into the driveway, stopped, and instantly 2 ominous, mean-ass dudes emerged, one moving rapidly from the front passenger seat, making a beeline for me. Not an ounce of hospitality anywhere on a gnarly, staunch face perched atop a brutish warrior tattooed torso. Later, menacing Hulk explained his thoughts. He thought me a repossession agent, formal dress, white European, the enemy. Fortunately, I'd seen his type many times and recognised danger present. as quickly as knowing he needed me more than me needing him. I turned and faced him, explaining who I was, and he explained who he was, the claimant. He was about to get an interview he wasn't expecting. He didn't want me inside his house, so we walked to my car parked on the street. Throughout the interview, words, "Pray for him," resounded in my brain, so I did. Before he could decline, object, or generally resist, the words of my prayer filled his space, the same type done to the giant German years earlier, and multitudes that would follow. His reply? My cousin did that a couple of days ago. And believe me, I fully expected this man to respond with total aggro due to his background and circumstances. His stereo was stolen, but he had retrieved it and it was damaged. He retrieved it because he caught the thief climbing over his fence and then beat him up. Local justice. I chuckled over his description of events and the fact that he didn't punch me too. Oh, gosh. A few weeks later I met him at a local petrol station. I was waiting at the counter to pay. When he walked in, his demeanour had completely changed. He greeted me warmly, didn't say much, but I could see it in his face. His world had moved. The stint with McLaren's International lasted 2 years. I tossed prayers willy-nilly over hundreds. Second wife, one day. Willy-nilly over hundreds, said my second wife one day after telling her the boss and a farmer's wife had complained. Well, it's too late. You've already prayed for hundreds. Laughed Carol. Wife too, when I sulked over the boss's reprimand. She was right. And it included Mormons. The Mormons of Northland. Shall I carry on? Well, we'll just carry on a bit more. It was just that, well, after that baptism in Otangerai, I liked doing it. Prayer. So I did. As often as I could. Then a strange pattern emerged. I was praying for Mormons. Mormons to Christians are kind of different. They have some priorities in worshipping stuff that to us are like fingernails on blackboard. The Anglican Bishop of New Zealand once declined an invite to open a big Mormon event because of those differences. Not because he was a snob. Actually, he's a man I hugely respect and honour with a massive open heart. And I hope that camera's focused on me. Oh well. So before I embark on this strange sequence of events, please understand I have nothing at all against Mormons. What I am about to write is a factual thing. Events that just, well, happened without any planning, agenda or motive on my part. It came from nowhere, totally out of left field, random and curved like a rugby ball, skipped past over the inside backs to an outside running winger, hell-bent on getting from A to B at speed and avoid the Goliath lining you up for a bone-shattering tackle. At least that's what it was like when I played junior and senior rugby. But there was no avoiding the giant awakening in me. As an assessor, my day was hectic, charging across the countryside, busy as hell, avoiding things that meant delay. But if the opportunity arose, I prayed for people, often in hardship, suffering, genuine loss, burglary, storm damage, flood, you name it, we saw it. Hey mate, I'll just say a quick prayer for you before I go. No permission seeking, explanation, no naff Christianese, just a quick prayer and I was out of there. Much to the confused, sometimes befuddled expression on the claimant. More often, however, a quiet, genuine thanks. Heck, who doesn't like a prayer? I have no idea at what point I realised the Mormons had arrived. I was not seeking them, nor did I invite. Probably it was a picture on a wall, a slogan somewhere in a house, something, but it was never a trigger. It was never a trigger of, oh, I see you're Mormons. Just let me, just, oh, I see you're Mormons. Well, just in case that wee demon sucker, oh God. Oh, I see you're Mormons. Well, let me see. Just let me cast that wee demon sucker right off you right now. In Jesus' name. That is not a winner, and I didn't do it that way. Before long, they were everywhere. The prayer for Mormon thing reached epidemic, the ridiculous, the bizarre, seemingly every day, if not every week. One morning, I casually asked the boss, Frank, who cared not a jot for religion, sex or politics in the workplace, but banned us from going there while on the job. Did we have some sort of contract or association with an insurer locked into a scheme or plan with Mormons? He said we didn't, and why? I don't know, I just seem to be always getting files with Mormons. I mumbled nonchalantly, shrugging, not wanting to trigger Frank's senses. Take the case of the Mormon floor slump. I walked into a house in Wangaray's southern suburbs with two young American Mormon missionaries stood sheepishly staring. A giant sagging slump in their floor spanned most of their kitchen, heading to ground zero. Water-sodden floor panels sagged almost to the subfloor ground below. The sink was leaking. It had gradually rotted the reconstituted wooden floor. The missionaries were saving souls, no distractions like tell a landlord his building was falling into the abyss below. Enter the assessor. The water damage claim and another Mormon encounter. We sorted it, and I picked their brain about all things Mormon. Said a quick prayer for them, and departed, leaving them, too, a wee bit stunned, because now I was curious. What was going on in their world that might, by chance or otherwise, lead to a surge in weird events? I jest you not. Within a few days I turned on the car radio, and possible answers seemed to shake my logical world once again. I was travelling north to a job, no idea of the background. Suddenly a radio voice was reporting that the Mormon church were about to embrace Jesus. It was the church's new position to be more in tune with the Gospels and New Testament, the reporter expounded. I thought, I'll be darned. Soon I was cruising into Kaikui, Mormon Central, and a burglary claim. The clients were clearly upset, emotional about the loss of personal effects while away on holiday, especially the wife. The smart Māori couple were hospitable and courteous, sitting in their lounge, giving details, and as we finished I noticed once again, of course, all things Mormon. So I asked them. They said they were Mormons. We had a light conversation about it, then I asked about the news item on the radio only an hour or so earlier. The guy flared and glared at me. Whoops. Body language broadcasted another message, defensive, negative. Then he was firmly declaring that if it was true, if that's what was happening in his church, he would definitely know about it. He would be consulted. Be part of the media release, fully briefed. He hadn't, so it had to be a figment of my imagination. And not so many words. How's that? I inquired. I'm a bishop. That ended the conversation real quick, right there, and it finished something else. I prayed a quick one before leaving, for peace and recovery, etc., etc., whether they liked it or not. The usual simple encouraging, but I will never forget the puzzled, curious expression on the face of this Mormon bishop. I remember it clearly for another reason. All Mormon claims stopped. No more Mormon files at all. Zilch. Nobody went. Maybe word went out to Big Brother, the great Mormon claims controller in Utah, or whoever, or whatever was behind the phenomenon. Oh, we probably should finish there because my screen's doing weird things. Oh, there we go. We'll finish it there.